Tuckahoe, and welcome to the Wednesday, October 14th, 2015 Tuckahoe Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The first thing I'd like to do is stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, great. We are going to be calling our own roll tonight. I'm going to start down at the end. Please state your name and present.
Nathan Jackman, present.
Tom Ringwald, present.
John Palladino, present.
Ron Gallo, present. I will note the absence of member Scalzo, who regrets that he could not make it. I know I spoke to him. He tried very much, but he travels a lot, and he's just not able to make it, so we'll be fine. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of September 9th, 2015. Is anyone that has any changes, alterations, or deletions?
Nope.
No? Good. All right, so I've made a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it was unanimous. Okay, thank you. The next thing we're going to do is we have one agenda item on tonight, and I'm going to call for 10 First Avenue to please come to the microphone.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Les Marin, Marin and Mazzanti, 5 Westchester Avenue, Pound Ridge, New York, for the applicant Martins. The property is located at 10 Fisher Avenue. It's section 42, block 9, lot 12. This evening with me is Tal Campagna, who is one of the co-owners of the bakery, as well as Len Brandis, who's the architect for the owner. I have reviewed as a little bit of a background, we're here this evening for to request an interpretation of this board. Section 7-712B of the New York State Village Law. Among the permitted actions of a zoning board are the board may reverse or affirm or modify any decision, interpretation, or determination, or interpretation as it ought to, that it can make its own decision as in the board's opinion, ought to have been made by the administrative official charged with the enforcement of the code. So we're not looking for a variance, we're looking for an interpretation from this board. As a bit of background, Martins Bakery has been at that site for, we understand, upwards of 80 years. The current landlord of the building, Frank Pesci, used to own it when it was known as Crestwood Bakery. We've been informed that he, in fact, worked there when he was a kid. It's been there for at least 50 years. I've looked in the building department files. It's not really clear when it was started, but there are records for work in that building going back to 1969. There's a clear indication in 1988 that there was a bakery there. When I moved to Tuckahoe in 1984, which was 31 years ago, I recall going to that bakery, and even before I had moved in, when I was visiting my kid brother who lived in the village, it was a bakery at that time also. The present owners of Martine took over the business in 2008 from Mr. Pesci. At that time, they obtained a new CVO as is required by the village code, and they were issued sign permits. At that time, they sold baked items and food, which they continue to do to this day. A few years ago, Martins applied for and was granted permits to legalize and correct certain work which had been undertaken by the prior owners, including the installation of, and at the request of the building department to meet the code, and at Mr. Brandis' suggestion, there was a second means of egress put from the lower level work area. Then there came a time when employees of the management of the adjoining property along Columbus Avenue filed complaints with the building department about the use of the driveway. This property does have deeded access through the property that fronts on Columbus Avenue to the back garage area of the building. It's noted on surveys, it's apparently noted in the deeds, and it's covered in their lease. Notwithstanding that there was this deeded access. They had lodged complaints with the building department about what was going on at the building. Mr. Williams visited the site, he saw the garage area that was there, and he recommended to the owners that they build a wall to separate where their two delivery trucks are parked, and to separate it out from a storage area that was there, and he suggested making an employee lounge and putting a bathroom in. So they followed his recommendation. Mr. Brandis drew the plans, and they made that application.
This was, if I can just interrupt you, this is when?
This would have been in late 2014
Okay.
or early 2015. After the
Recently,
Correct,
right. All
right.
fine.
After after the application was filed, by letter dated February 5th, 2015, Bill Williams denied their building permit, and his denial was based on, he claimed the use, he mentions a couple of sections, 4-6.1 of the code, which says, provides that no such building or premises shall have as its major object the catering or furnishing of services to other than the residents of the locality. It then says your proposed does. I suspect it should say your proposed use does not comply. I'll get into some rationale with that later. He also claimed that they required a special permit because it was manufacturing and assembling, and that there were items of 5 rated horsepower or more, and all of that required a special permit. And it says your use is not permitted.
Okay, what I'd like to do, with council, I'd like to just take a little break from your presentation. I'm going to call you back up if that's okay with you. I'd just like to hear a little bit from Mr. Williams so we can just get a little more explanation, and then you come back up. Is that okay with you?
You're the chairman, it's fine with me.
Okay. Unless anyone, any members object to that, are we okay? I'd just like to have some, I'd like to hear Mr. Williams on his version of exactly what occurred.
Well, what occurred was we had received complaints that there was some work going on in the building and that they had expanded their use.
Now, what I'm trying to understand and get my arms around is this was initially generated as a request for a permit for an interior alteration. Is that correct? And that's what it says here. Please take notice, application 12314, the permit for interior alteration for the prep area food storage. I'm trying to understand when things change, just so for my own edification, and I hope for the boards and the public.
I don't have the first denial letter, but the first denial letter was to legalize work that had already been done. This is a second letter from an expansion of that original approval.
Mr. Maron, are you for, maybe you should stay at the microphone if that's okay. Okay, this is where I'm confused on a first denial versus the second denial. Are you familiar with the first denial?
No.
Okay. Because I'm trying to understand, just for my own purposes, is to understand the generation of this situation. And so it was started as an application or started as a complaint? That's what I don't know.
Started as a complaint,
It started as a complaint.
yes.
And how did it go from a complaint to an interior alteration request, if I'm reading this correctly? This is what
Like I just said, we received a complaint, we went down, work was done without a permit.
I see.
They then went to planning, got some site plan
So
approval.
they were gonna legalize the work without a permit.
Correct.
Okay. So we had some work done without a permit, whether or not they knew they needed one, which I don't think we need to get into. So initially, there was a complaint, of which then triggered an alertness to you that there was some work being done that you felt needed a permit, and then that request for that work was denied.
Well, only in the normal course of business because it required site plan approval.
Did the denial have anything to do with the complaint? Were they intertwined?
No,
No. So the complaint was, again, refresh my memory, what was the complaint about?
there was work going on without permits,
That was what the complaint was.
yes.
Counsel?
If I may, Bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, when the chairman mentioned the first and second letters, there were 2 rounds of applications and work, correct?
Yes,
There was work that they did, you said there was work that was done without a permit, you sent a letter of that, they then got the permit and they got site plan approval, and that was approved, and they've since closed out that permit, correct?
I don't remember whether it was closed or not, because I think some additional work had taken place besides, but I would have to go back and look.
But this, your February 5th letter was sort of a second round, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's just what we're here this evening for?
Correct.
Okay.
Just this portion here, correct.
Before we go any further, does members have any questions as so far? Counsel, you have anything you'd like to interject?
No, I'm working off the February 5th letter also.
Okay. All right, so, because when this initially came to us, the first time we heard of this, I don't remember it being as an interpretation. I remember it being as just an application for a variance for the basement. The first time I went down there to see it. Was it an interpretation at that time?
No, this letter that generated the denial,
Was after we saw it the first time or before?
no, it was before.
We
But-
saw them.
But between the first visit and now, they've hired counsel, and counsel's now asking you to do an interpretation. They didn't apply for a variance. They've just applied for an interpretation.
But
Well, it wasn't clear what was applied for in the first
Correct.
application.
Yes, because I
Brandis,
remember-
Because he wasn't sure what he was applying for. Bill says, file an application, so he did. Then when he was at when Mr. Brandis appeared at the zoning board in the first round, I think.
and
it
we
was
did a site
probably-
visit then.
And you did a site visit
Yes.
at that time. There was some discussion that, why are you here, what are you doing, maybe it's just an interpretation, which is when they brought me on board, and I said, I agree, I think it's an interpretation. So we re-noticed it, and I clarified, we sent out, we mailed new notices to all the adjoining property owners, and there was a new notice published that we really weren't looking for a variance, we were looking for an interpretation of Mr. Williams' letter, which this board is authorized to do by state law. It wasn't really clear what they were looking for in the first round, and I think this board had implied, why aren't you here? I wasn't here, but I was
Right.
told that the board had pretty much said, why aren't you looking for an interpretation? And I know it's a little unusual, it's not something that you normally hear, because you normally hear variances, but it's certainly something that you're legally authorized to do.
This is our first time, at least my first time, and I can speak for the board. I think it's their first time. This is unusual, and I would have to say, quite frankly, in the numerous courses that we've taken, the education courses, I've never, this is something, we've practiced our 5-prong test, but this is something different for us to digest, get our arms around, or anything that may fit in this. But this board is a board that is willing to take on anything that is required of us, and we're happy to do this. I just want to make sure that we do everything properly. My next question for counsel, and if counsel for the applicant wants to interject, is there anything that should be necessary for this board in an outside contractor? And I think of Frank Fish, and I don't mean of him in the specifics of him specifically, but is there something, we rely on Frank Fish many times to come in and assist us in something like this. Is this something that we would be looking for an additional professional to come in for additional opinion to assist us, or is that?
Well, what it is, what the board's acting as is basically a quasi-judicial board. So what you're doing is, Bill has made a determination on the code. He's read the code and made a determination how to interpret this applicant's application. The applicant's coming in now and appealing that to you. So you're acting as basically the judge in this case. So you're going to hear, take Bill's side and listen to Mr. Marin's side, and you're going to make a determination. So if I could kind of narrow down a little bit of what the big issue is here. What happens is, in our zoning code 4-6.1, in the business district, it allows certain things as of right, okay? And one of those things is a retail store. And that's what the bakery's been considered for this 80-plus years. Recently, Mr. Williams says, well, you've expanded, and this expansion has pushed you into a manufacturing location. And what happens here with this 4-6.1...
In his opinion.
In his opinion. I'm just saying, repeating Mr. Williams. And Mr. Williams, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to put words in your mouth. So he says this use has expanded, and now it's a manufacturing instead of a retail use. And in the business district, to become a manufacturer, you need a special permit. So Mr. Williams said to the applicant, well, you need a special permit because now you're a manufacturer. So I believe the applicant's coming to you guys and saying now, well, we need an interpretation of what our code says, whether we're still retail or a manufacturer. They're going to say they're still a retail store. Mr. Maron, correct me if I'm wrong if I'm saying anything
No, that's
that you don't
exactly.
agree.
Okay, but my question, okay, let me
Trying
just
to
stop you there.
simplify it for
Yeah,
you.
I got you, but here's the question. Are they coming to us for an interpretation, or are they coming to us for a special permit for the manufacturer?
Well, it's based on your interpretation. If your interpretation of the code is what the applicant's interpretation is, that they're still retail, then they don't need a special permit
see.
because it's as of right in the business district.
I see.
If you agree with Mr. Williams that they're manufacturing now, then they would need a special permit because that's what a manufacturing use needs in a business district.
So there's no special permit prior given at all for this facility?
No, it was originally retail.
And it didn't require a special permit?
So what the board needs to do is, they've done their site visits. Mr. Williams can explain his interpretation of the code and why he thinks it's manufacturing. You're going to listen to the applicant of why they say it's retail, and then you guys make the decision.
All right, I'm going to ask for more information from Mr. Williams, but before that, is Mr. Maron, is there anything you'd like to add?
Do you want me to go ahead trying to convince you, or?
No. Add to what's been
No,
said.
no, I agree with Mr. Gertzen's interpretation, because that's frankly what we're saying. We're saying that it's retail. Currently, it doesn't rise to being a special permit.
Is there any members have anything they'd like to ask before we continue?
Just one clarification, you said it's retail permanently, and the plan is to stay retail?
Correct.
Okay,
They're not changing the use.
all right.
Mr. Williams, can you continue and enlighten us as to what made you feel this is a manufacturer when you did your visit, which I believe was triggered by a complaint? Is that correct?
Well, we received several complaints, and when we went down and took a look at what was originally approved by the planning board for site plan and what was transpiring on the site with the vehicles in and out and the fact that they have another store in Scarsdale that they're providing all these baked goods for.
How did you determine that another store in Scarsdale?
The owner said they had another store in Scarsdale.
Okay.
Then, if you remember several months ago, when we had a work session, it came to light from the applicant, they were also serving some outside catering.
That was country clubs or something, if I
Whatever,
recall.
I don't remember what it was at the time, but, so looking at the fact that there's another store that they're supplying, and the other outside catering, there was a question as to what the use was.
Do we have any limitations or any restrictions or any guidance on trucking? Nothing. So whether they run 100 trucks a day or one truck a day, there's nothing in the village code that,
That's something that the planning board would have to look at site plan.
We'll speak into there because, again, we don't have our...
That's something that the planning board would have to look at site plan.
But if it's to help us with the interpretation of whether or not this is still a retail or manufacturing, I mean, I assume we're allowed to use that in our judgment. If they're running 30 trucks in a day, you might lean towards manufacturing. If it's two, I'm just.
You know,
giving
you
an
guys
example.
can use whatever you
Yes, I mean,
need.
it could be
You
a
can-
rationale, but.
You can clearly look at whatever's in the file, the property folder, to see what's there, what was going on, what's going on now, to help you make your decision.
Now, I might also add, in line with what Chairman Gallo said, in the first paragraph in the description for the business district, 4.61, indicates that no building shall be used for any purpose except as described here, except that as set forth below, provided that no such building or premises shall have as its major object the catering or furnishing of services to other than the residents of the locality. So that's not saying that it has to only be the locality, but it says its major principal. And our position is that Martins, and I'll get into percentages later, but the largest percentage of their business is to serving the locality. And I would mention, and I've mentioned it to Gary, that frankly, this particular section may not even be enforceable or constitutional, but we're saying we comply with it anyhow. Because I'm not sure that a municipality can limit services to only that locality, which is the intention here, but we're saying, you know, and I'll just skip ahead to it briefly, it's our position that roughly of the bakery items that are sold, 80% are sold at that Fisher Avenue location to folks who are walking into that store. 18% are brought to Martine's other store in Scarsdale, which does have its own kitchen, but they do supply items for there. It's not an everyday back and forth, it's one truck a day that goes back and forth. And about 2%, they do some baking for a country club. It's an extremely small percentage of their business, just as any pizzeria might cater to someone else, or any other establishment in the area might be catering or providing services to someone else. Going back to the arguments that I have, the section 4.6, as Gary had mentioned, does 4.62A does say that retail stores are permitted. It also says that restaurants are permitted. They do serve a small amount of food there. Currently, of their business, about 50% is bakery items, 30% is food, and about 20% are drinks. Drinks meaning coffee and mixed drinks like that.
That's at that location.
At 10 Fisher Avenue. So they do serve items. So someone might say that it might be called a restaurant, but that's a permitted use in that area. And it's all retail sales anyhow there. There are other special permit uses in the area, and we don't believe that this business has been around and has been there since before the current code was established in 2001. So even we could make an argument it's a legal prior legal non-conforming use.
Now you're talking
There's
about,
some issue
if
now.
I can just stop you, you're talking about B special permit uses that are in the letter that I have in front of me?
Yes, if in fact an argument is made that it falls into the special permit category, our position is that it doesn't, but even if someone does fall into that category, this use clearly predates the requirement.
Okay,
of
so
special
let's
permit.
just for the record, I'm going to read this for the public's own edification. Manufacturing, assembling, converting, altering, finishing, cleaning, or processing of products where goods so produced or processed are to be sold on the premises, provided that an area is fully concealed from any street, power not exceeding total of 5 rated horsepower shall be used exclusively unless the Board of Trustees finds that installation of over 5 horsepower will have no adverse effect of the Board of Trustees, it's interesting, on the neighborhood uses, and except specific below, not more than 5 persons are engaged. So basically, if both attorneys can correct me if I'm wrong, special permit says manufacturing to be sold on the premises. So this says that a special permit is required even if the manufacturing is to be sold on premises, not just off premises, and that the area is fully concealed, which, based on my site visit, it is fully concealed, and power not total of 5 rated horsepower. Mr. Williams, where's the horsepower?
Mr. Chairman, on this, it's almost, you're jumping ahead a step, in a way. Because again, you may never, if you decide that this is a retail location or a restaurant, it's a permitted use, this will never come into play.
Yeah, but
If you decide it's manufacturing, then they're going to be applying for a special permit.
But this would assist us in determining whether it is manufacturing. Would it trigger the special permit uses, which then would clearly be manufacturing? Where are we on the horsepower, if I can ask that question? Does anybody know?
There is equipment, this 5 horsepower is an incredibly archaic, it's been there since probably the 30s. Any standard refrigerator or freezer in a restaurant or bakery, whether it's going to be more than 5 horsepower, theirs is, as is virtually every restaurant or establishment in that area.
And 5 people? except as specified below, not more than 5 persons are engaged in such production or processing.
They've had more, well, our position is it's not manufacturing because these,
I understand that,
These
and I
terms
understand
are not-
what our council said, but for my own purposes, I want to go backwards on this
There are more
one.
than 5 people there, there have been more than 5 people there since before they started operating in 2008.
Okay. Mr. Williams, any comment on anything said so far? You concur?
I would have to go back and check the dates. I'm not sure of the dates.
But you can concur that that it's entirely possible that there may be more than 5 people there based on your visitation, and would you concur that there is more than 5 horsepower? However, the law is not updated, and it may be entirely possible that everybody has 5 horsepower, and they don't require special permits.
Well, certainly when the previous owner had it, all that refrigeration, everything downstairs was not there. It was just a basement.
How long has Martine's been there?
Since 2008, and there were cooking and prep areas and storage areas there.
How long have you worked here?
1999.
Any other questions?
If we could go back to kind of the initial discussion, which was the clarification of whether or not we consider this to be manufacturing or retail. Could you clarify how many people are currently working there during a day, roughly? Nothing specific, but.
If I may, I also want to, I will address your specific question, but I do want to point out that this whole definition of manufacturing, assembling, converting, none of those terms are defined. They're talking about products and goods. They're not talking about bakery items, which is what we're talking about. They're not talking about pizzas. They're not talking about bagels, which is what that whole area is. There's a shoe repair store there. There's Villa Arena, which may arguably be manufacturing, but as far as we know, they don't have a special permit, nor have they been required to get one. There's a dry cleaner store. They're not manufacturing, assembling, and selling things. I mean, nothing there falls into these categories where it's a plant that's making something to be sold on the premises. They're all service businesses and they're retail stores, and that's what we have here. These definitions just don't work for anything, and the terms, in fact, aren't even defined. And that's one of the reasons we're saying, hey, it's a retail store. It might even be called a restaurant because of some of the food they sell, but it's clearly not manufacturing, assembling, converting, altering, finishing, cleaning, and processing of products where goods so produced or processed are to be sold on the premises. That's not what they're doing. That's not what anyone in that area is doing as far as we can tell. Going back to your question about the operation, they currently have a total of 12 to 14 employees, though all of them are not there at the same time. For example, there's a night baker who comes in at midnight. He's there till 6 or 6:30 in the morning. The first counter girl arrives at 5:30 because they open at 5:30, 5:45. The second counter girl gets there at 1. The second shift of counter girls comes at 1 when those leave. There's 2 bakers that come in at 7 in the morning. They're there till about 3. There's 2 more bakers who come in at 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. because you have to understand things have to be ready for the morning. There's 1 dishwasher who gets there, works from 8 to 3. There's a second dishwasher who works from 3 to closing. There's 2 cleaning girls who are normally around starting about 2 o'clock to closing. So
But in general, throughout the day, there are 12 to 14.
general throughout the day, it's hard to tell exactly. They have 12 to 14 employees altogether. They're all not there at the same time.
That's fine.
Because it's a rotating group. I mean, as you saw.
And this
when you walked
includes
through
the staff
before-
upstairs as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. I mean, there were probably 6 or 7 people working there when you walked through earlier this evening, and that's probably an average for what's happening because there's only so much space, there's only so many warm bodies that can be down there.
Okay. And the single oven on the premises is the oven on the first floor, the large?
I'd have to defer to Tal on that.
Okay. And then how many cold storage units are there?
Tal? 3.
3.
Okay, before I open to the public hearing, I would ask the architect to come to the microphone, if that's okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sure.
I don't want to belabor this. I mean, I could
We'll have you back, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not gonna, I have many more questions for you.
Fine.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and member of the boards. I'm Leonard Brandis, the architect for Martine's Bakery. I mean, I could probably clarify some of the questions that came up at this point.
Say whatever you want to say, we need information.
Okay. Actually, our first permit that we got was for an expansion of the first floor in terms of the seating area, and which we did get approvals for. We would go with the planning boards and got full approval for that.
But that wasn't from us.
No.
Okay.
When we went to get the permit for that, Mr. Williams said that he heard that there was things in the basement that had to be legalized. At which point he said, let's go downstairs, legalize the basement, because things had been done without permits. There's no question about that. And that's when I was brought into the space, actually, to take a look at that. We go there, we reorganize it, we are working on legalizing it, we added a second means of egress. This is the total area that you have seen now, is that area where they produce things. That is the same area that we had gotten permits for and have been working at legalizing. Right now, I think there's still electric permit still is open on that, because we're told we can hold off on that finishing until we do this work upstairs, because we added another bathroom upstairs. So instead of ripping the ceilings down twice, Mr. Williams said it was okay to continue with the electric at that point. And then later on, there was a time when they were getting complaints. Part of the issue was that the parking lot over the summertime was being reused, was being redone. And the parking lot on the side where most of their work was going in and out, most of the goods were going in and out, was closed off to all traffic.
Okay, let me just stop you there. When you're referring to this, just to my own clarification, are you talking about the big lot outside
The
that?
major lot, yes,
Okay.
the public parking lot.
All right.
It says that is the back of their store backs up to that, and that's where they have parking, and a lot of trucks and deliveries were coming through there, and still come through there.
Okay.
They do have access, legal access, through the alleyway where they have a garage door entrance down into their building. That area did start getting a lot more use during the time of that repairs of the street. That is when the calls started coming into Mr. Williams with complaints that they were doing different things. When the driveways, when the parking lot was back to normal, the traffic slowed down dramatically. They were bringing maybe 1 or 2 trucks a day that actually use that alleyway. Delivery-wise, deliveries are early in the morning most of the time. They actually park on Columbus Avenue and use hand trucks to bring the goods in. They don't back trucks in the middle of the night coming back and forth into the space. So this is, the trucking and manufacturing. We don't have big trucks going in and out delivering things all over the place. That's not what's happening in this. This is not a manufacturing plant. They had received a call, Mr. Williams got a call that they were cooking in the garage area that you had seen that we were legalizing. And Mr. Williams called me up, and we met with the fire department. We all looked in there. There was no cooking going on there, but that's when there was storage, that they had storage going on in that area of the garage. Mr. Williams requested that I put a permit in to close off section of the garage over there and put in a new handicap bathroom down there for the employees to use, and also a little lounge, because there were a couple of people that were eating lunch in that garage at the time that we went in there. So we submitted plans as per request, and that is when we got this, several months later, we finally got the response that this was going to be a manufacturing area. Well, certainly, restaurants, I deal with restaurants all the time, and I'll have 7 or 8 people in the back room in the restaurant, and you have 6 waitresses, and you have everybody running around. That is what a restaurant does. It's not manufacturing. We're not making TVs. We're not making, computers. We are producing cakes, pastries, food. It's more of it's a retail outlet. This is retail. This is what we're making, this is what we're producing. So the question came in now, are we a manufacturer or whatever, but it's going by hearsay as we have big trucks going in and out, delivering all over the place, but we don't have that. That doesn't exist. So.
Any questions for the architect from the board? No. All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Just since I'm new to the issue, just to clarify, so the permit, everything that this is related to was simply that garage area in between where the doors open and where essentially the door where you enter the prep area.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. So
That is what triggered this.
that's what triggered this, is essentially that large kind of open space. Everything else had already been approved, done.
Correct.
Up to par, everything else in the space.
Yes. We did not enlarge the working area in the basement area from our approved permits.
And so this kind of garage area is what made you kind of change from it being a retail to manufacturing? Because when the prior permits were approved for the prep area, at that point it was okay. But it doesn't seem like any additional workable space or any new cooling equipment or anything prep-related has been added to the
Well,
space.
when we went there, in that garage area, there were baked goods that were out there.
Out there.
In the garage area, correct.
Well, it was.
Now it's my understanding that they want to use it strictly for storage and a little area for the employees. So the reason we're here is to find out whether or not they are still a retail because they sell off-site, or are they manufacturing like any other large bakery?
Right, so what I'm trying to determine is essentially what made you move from them saying, okay, they're retail, they're fine, they're doing their retail thing. As soon as we kind of started talking about this open garage space, suddenly that changed your mind from saying they're retail under the previous permits to now we need to look at them as a manufacturer.
Actually, after we issued the permit and the site had been moved along and we had started doing some inspections, it came to light about the number of employees that were there and the work that was going on and the fact that they were going to other locations.
Okay, so it was, as a result of this kind of further work that was being done in the garage, you discovered that, in your opinion, there was too many employees. This food was being delivered to outside locations. This is what caused you to view this as manufacturing.
Well, that's what triggered us looking harder based on a complaints as to what it was.
That's what I'm trying to determine. So essentially, the prep area that was already there, all this stuff was already okay under the previous permit. It didn't cause anything. It was this kind of additional space, and then at that point, you discovered that
Right,
there were
further
too many
into the
employees.
garage with more storage, more employee space.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
believe it or not, this is actually very similar to the salon across the street for the pets. If you remember on that was an interpretation also as to the use. And basically that is what this has come down to. Just to you guys look at it and say, is the use really retail or is it more than
It's
that?
interesting that you bring that up, because the salon, the pet salon, for reasons that may or may not apply to this, has now closed their doors not as a business, but on the amount of people that they're not taking any new customers. And we are a customer there, and they're not taking anybody else. They're not over, they've reached their limit, and they're not taking on new clientele.
Right. At the end of the day, if you guys determine this is retail and it is not manufacturing, we're going to move on to site plan approval. They're going to get their site plan for that little expansion, and they'll continue their business.
Well, I think really what this comes down to, I mean, look, are they a manufacturer? Yes, they're a manufacturer in the general sense of the word, because they manufacture for their own purposes. They manufacture a cupcake and they sell it. The greater word of manufacturing becomes in the expansion of the business. What is the business doing? And what we have here is, one of them, in my opinion, one of the best bakeries in the county, if not in the state. This is a bakery that has fantastic product. It's I know this because I purchased it there, and I know this is New York City quality stuff. And I also know through my own personal business that many people in Bronxville that I service have referenced this particular property and this particular business and the superb quality of the product that they produce. And a natural event in capitalism is that growth occurs, and sooner or later a trigger does occur where that fantastic business, is growing and bumps up against the limitations that a particular municipality may have in it, as far as then being disruptive to the neighborhood, a victim of their own circumstances, so to speak. Lenny, is there anything else you want to add?
Just that if you consider that manufacturing, that means every restaurant is a manufacturer. Every pizza place which delivers pies all over the place are manufacturers.
I mean that the word
It's a-
manufacturer becomes a different word. They are manufacturing something. They're not buying cupcakes from Little Debbie and selling them. They're making their own, and they're manufacturing their own. But where they become a manufacturer to other businesses, and that distribution, becomes a problem, that's the line that we have to find.
And if I may,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's arguing that someone baking goods is creating widgets to export to China. However, I think common sense tells us that if you are a pizza business and you're making pizzas, and then for sake of argument, 10 years down the road, you've grown so much that you're exporting 1,000 frozen pizzas a day, you're no longer kind of producing. You are, a manufacturing operation at that point. So being a baked goods does not preclude you from being a manufacturing. So I think we just need to clarify that when we are saying manufacturing, there is something with baked goods where you can manufacture. Little Debbie's are not a mom and pop bakery. It's a manufacturing facility that creates baked goods. I'm not saying by any way means that this is the same situation, but
Right. I mean, we're not in that scale in any way.
no, of course, but there is a line between producing locally and becoming a manufacturing. So I think I don't think we need to argue that there is a point at which any sort of business will reach a manufacturing.
I'd like you to,
Most manufacturers will be producing product to sell at other locations, supermarkets, things like that. That is not what they're doing in any way or form.
Understood, yes.
Okay.
That's also part of
all right, stay around, Len, in case we have more questions for you. Yeah,
I have something, as a matter of clarification, if they're determined not to be just strictly a retail, okay? The only difference would be that if they're determined to be a manufacturer, they would just need a special use permit. Am I correct? That would be the only difference? They could still do their business, but they would need a special permit.
If you guys determine that they are manufacturing, they would need a special permit.
That's,
and they would then have to.
then they would be able to conduct business, but
Well, then they would have to
they
fall-
would be required to get a special permit.
Then they would have to fall under those guidelines for manufacturing.
Isn't that something, though, we
Which
deal
are
with further
stated
down?
here.
A higher bar, I would.
Isn't that something we deal with further down the road, though? I mean, this first decision is ultimately, we're kind of wasting our time if we go further down
Correct.
the road.
If you guys deem that this is just retail as it was, this is the end of it.
Right.
Okay.
But if we don't, it's not just that their ability to get the special permit may be more complicated than we realize.
As you can see, as the process is going here, this was something that we wrestled with for a long time before the letter came out.
Okay.
So if I may, this determination of retail versus manufacturing, if we determine them as a retail location and we say on the record that, we truly believe that they are just producing these goods for these two locations and that, his statistics here of 80% at Fisher, 18% in Scarsdale, we find that reasonable and that a majority of their objects are being sold locally, we consider them retail. What does that affect for the village in general going forward? Does this impact any sort of town laws or anything like this, or will we still be able to determine on a case-by-case basis for any future industries whether or not they are retail or manufacturing?
Gary,
In
unless I'm wrong, I
my
think it's
opinion on that,
case-by-case.
it's gonna be a case-by-case basis, because nobody's gonna come in here pretty much with the same exact facts and say, wait a second, you guys are bound
Right, that's what I'm
because you made a determination here. And my understanding is the business district right now is limited to just that little Crestwood piece.
That little Crestwood piece and the little piece right here in front of
Yeah, so-
where Village Hall is.
And so there's
very
not-
small locations in the village that are this business district.
Okay, and there's nothing in the code saying that, you're not allowed to have a large prep space and a large retail space. As long as you are selling that product locally at the location,
That's correct. There's no limit to the size of their space. If they wanted to, they could expand their business by taking two other stores and
as
just
long as
opening
they're
it up.
selling it in that location, they can be as large as, as they want in that area, correct?
Yeah, I think from reading of the code, it says that they can also sell some off-site. I believe you
All right.
Right,
would
so-
need the majority of your stuff to be locally.
So the only way we're really going to determine them as manufacturing is how much of this food is going off-site. If it's staying on-site, there's no issue. If it's going off-site to catering, to Scarsdale, and we determine that to be a large portion of their product, that's really the only thing that's going to butt up against our town code there.
I believe that's the only thing that comes in. If you guys have determined that most of it is locally and that the small portion that goes out is a small portion, then that would be the end of the discussion.
And sir, counsel, do you have, and I hate to ask because I'm a math guy, so I'm sorry if I get nerdy here. Do you have background to this 80%, this 18%? I mean, obviously, I'd love to just trust you and just assume those numbers are correct,
do you
but how
mean
is
by-
this determined?
What do you mean by background?
Facts to back it up.
Yes, there,
It's, I'll have to defer to Tal, the owner, if you don't mind.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that this is something we're not going to be deciding tonight, and you can make requests of information that you would like for next month's meeting.
That's fine. I think just while we're here, and this is the kind of the
Yeah,
major
I
determination.
really want to get the public hearing opened,
Okay,
just to if we can gather any more information.
whatever you think is best. That's
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion now to open the public hearing on the interpretation for 10 Fisher Avenue. Do I have a second?
Oh, she came up to that.
If I may, in response to the member's question, Tal can explain how she arrived at the 80-22% suggestion?
Would you mind, Ron? I would like to,
Yeah, but I'd also like it in writing.
okay, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, in Scarsdale, we do have a kitchen. So what we bake in Scarsdale, in Tuckahoe and send to Scarsdale is actually the little pastries that we sell in the store. It's not the morning pastries at all. It's not croissants, it's not scones, it's not muffins. That is a large part of the bakery. We send a couple of mousse cakes, kinds of mousse cakes, not a couple, number of them, but certain kinds of mousse cakes and the pastries that we send over there. The majority of what we sell in the bakery, which are the morning pastries, is baked over there. It's made and baked over there. We don't, Tuckahoe bakes for Tuckahoe and Scarsdale bakes for Scarsdale. The thing is that I need my two chefs that know how to bake those specific pastries in Tuckahoe. We have the.
You mean like your macaroons and things like that, like your
Yeah.
smaller specialized
The
items?
specialized items are baked in Tuckahoe and
Okay.
sent to Scarsdale. And
So,
we,
so all your bread goods, your breads, your croissants, this kind of large display behind the counter, that's all
Correct.
done up in Scarsdale for the
Yes.
Scarsdale location?
yes.
Okay,
We have a night baker over there. We have kitchen people over there. We do not manufacture it in
okay.
Tuckahoe or bake it in Tuckahoe, or we don't. It's
Okay.
a totally separate entity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I may, it's just to try to wrap up a little, I would respectfully suggest that, I could have come here with cases and citations and definitions and whatever about what manufacturing is, and Gary could have gone back and forth, other people could have gone back and forth. I just think we have to look at it as plainly as what's going on there. It's a retail operation, as Tal has explained, and we'll provide additional information if you want it.
I really want to get the public hearing open
I understand
and get that, to see if there's any more information we need for clarification before we wrap up.
So do you want me to do my wrap-up at the end, then?
Yes, I'm gonna call you back. I want to see if there's any more information we need, and then I'm gonna want some information in writing from you. So what I'm gonna do is, again, I'm making a motion to open the public hearing on 10 Fisher Avenue. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, the public hearing is open for 10 Fisher. Is anyone that would like to come up and address the board? Yes, sir, come right up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Rocco Salerno, attorney for Crestwood Station Plaza Company, the owner of 269 and 273 Columbus Avenue, which is immediately in front of this garage that we're discussing. The access to this garage is on a very small driveway easement that belongs to my client. That's why my client is concerned about this proposed expansion of the existing use. I'd like to first state that the applicant is seeking an interpretation of the code, but the code is clear. What the applicant is really trying to do is requiring this board to make a factual determination, which I respectfully submit the board does not have the authority to do. This is an issue as to whether or not the applicant is manufacturing. That issue has to be determined by a trier of fact, not by a zoning board. And I think the proper forum and venue for this application would be an Article 78 proceeding in the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Counsel, can you explain what was just stated to us?
I think what Mr. Salerno is saying is that this board is not the proper board to make this determination of whether this is manufacturing or not. And I don't want to put words in Mr. Salerno's
Well, the public
mouth,
hearing's
but-
still open, so if he decides to come back up and
And I think you're
add
going to keep it
anything-
open. But this board really needs to interpret the code and the meaning of the code and the words in the code. And I really think that's what you're doing here. And I think, Nathan, you put it succinctly, is that, where's that bar? And we have retail and it converts over to manufacturing. And I think you really have to look at the code and interpret the meaning of the code and say, and really read into that and figure out based on the facts.
But aren't we being asked to overrule Mr. Williams?
That's exactly. The applicants made an appeal to you to overrule him. Sure. That's what they're here for.
And that's why I said at the beginning of this, that this is something that, and we've never been educated on this. And it is something new to us. In all my meetings with the proper, county authorized educator, I've never heard this come up before. I've never even had it, this is, completely new to me. And I had asked, originally, we normally, when we have problems like this, we require the applicant to bring in some sort of outside counsel, for lack of a better word, and generally it's Mr. Fish, and then he gives us an additional interpretation of what our responsibilities are to allow us to a better understanding. I know that's why we have you here, but we also do bring in Mr. Fish, and I don't know if this is in his purview, but for us to say we have the power to overrule our building inspector.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask Ron, is it necessarily overruling, or are we saying that essentially Bill is limited to his interpretation of the code according to how it's written, which right now it's written saying a major object, the catering or furnishing of services to other than the residents of the locality, and all they're really asking us to do is determine, well, what does major object mean? And if they are providing only to the residents of the locality, then
But why
not really
us?
contradicting
But why
Bill.
us is what I'm saying. Why us?
That's your job.
All right. Well, again, this
It's
is
what you're here for. It's what your existence is. You're appealing.
right.
They're appealing his decision.
And his decision is based on a line of
But-
code that is not exactly crystal clear. So they're asking for an interpretation.
see where I'm not clear with Mr. Salerno, who's if he's willing to come back. An Article 78 is when we make a determination. I don't know if an Article 78 is when the building inspector makes a determination. Am I wrong?
Article 78 applies to any administrative decision. And again, my point here is, the applicant is not asking for an interpretation. Everyone, I think, agrees on what the code provides. What the applicant's asking for is a factual determination as to whether or not they're manufacturing. I don't think there's any dispute as to what the code provides consists of manufacturing. So again, I don't know why, I question the authority of this board to make that factual determination.
Isn't that exactly what this 4-6.1 does? Is that's the dividing line between at what point are they no longer, is the major objective? Isn't that the kind of how we branch out between retail and manufacturing?
That's basically the.
That's basically the code that says,
Correct, and I think.
do you or do you not meet this standard for retail?
Right, and I think Mr. Williams made that determination. The applicant's appealing that, and then it
Yeah.
goes to this board,
Okay.
zoning board of appeals, to make the determination.
So
Right,
we're
if
left-
this board is determined that the major part is not that,
Right,
then a retail.
right. Yeah, so I think we're well within, interpreting this language.
Anything else, Mr. Salerno?
No, I would just request that the board keep the public hearing open in any event. My client intended on being here this evening, and she was not able to come. She wants to offer some testimony as to the extent of the deliveries going to this location. I heard the architects earlier stating that there are not large trucks. We have pictures here, which again, my client will testify to, of tractor trailers delivering to this site.
May we?
If you'd like, I'll be happy to hand it out.
And what is your client's primary concern? You know, obviously she's not here to speak for herself, but what is her primary concern if we approve this as a continued retail
The
space?
concern is the expanded use has wreaked havoc on this small driveway entranceway. These tractor trailers, as you can see in that photograph, block the entranceway. They come in very early in the morning, like when most of us are sleeping, and the residential tenants upstairs are calling on a constant basis, complaining about the parking area being blocked and the noise and the obstruction.
And has this been a new development? How long have these complaints been coming in?
Since this operation has expanded, I have nothing bad to say about Martins at all. They do a wonderful job, but they're a victim of their own success.
And now
They've outgrown the location.
And now they've stated that this was due to the parking issues when the lot was under construction. Was that kind of the timing of when this started getting very bad, was during that?
It's continuing to today.
Okay. So even as we speak, this is still an issue for your client?
As of yesterday, anyway, when I spoke to my client.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Maron, would you like to see this photograph? Mr. Salerno, if you can make additional copies for the next meeting?
My client will be here at the next meeting with many photographs
Thank you.
and additional copies for the entire board.
Okay.
Does that make a big difference to me, these numbers?
If I may, I'm not certain what that photo shows, but they've,
I will get more information at the next meeting.
if I may, just to clarify something, this is on Columbus Avenue, as Lynn Brandis had stated earlier. They frankly, they tell me they don't have tractor trailer trucks. They don't have that kind of quantity of items coming in the first place. But their trucks have not been going down that driveway recently. They have been taking hand trucks from Columbus Avenue down there on the early morning runs. And that whole area, I mean, it's, I don't want to get into a tit for tat about what's going on back there with the adjoining property owner, other than that they've started a spite fest. As to Mr. Salerno's suggestion that this board can't make a factual decision, they have to. We can't bring, nor can anyone commence an Article 78 directly challenging Mr. or asking for interpretation or challenging Mr. Williams' letter, because the first thing that Gary's going to do in that Article 78 is say that it's not timely because they haven't exhausted their administrative remedies by going to the zoning board. That's the first thing Gary would do if we started that proceeding, which is why we're at the zoning board. We can't go directly to Article 78, nor do we want to do that. We have no intention of escalating this. I mean, quite frankly, I'm not going to stand here and give you citations about what manufacturing is, what retail is. I think you just have to look at it from a common sense point of view of what's going on there. It's like one of my favorite Justice Potter Stewart said, can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. You know, you're not going to be able to definitely, this definition is so inartfully drafted and so general, so ambiguous, you're just going to have to look at what's going on there, what they're doing, what your code says, and I'd respectfully submit that they have a retail operation there, they are not manufacturing. There was some mention earlier that you wanted some additional information from us, if you want to either.
I would like
convey it through
something
Gary or
written out
directly through you.
as to the percentages and the regularity of the shipments and the regularity of the customers. So if there's a customer that is a country club, do you service them once a week, once a month, once a year? But I want it in writing.
That's not a problem. And obviously, it's difficult, I mean.
Yeah, I understand.
call
And
and
we're not
say,
going to ask for,
tell-
you know.
like you yourself had mentioned, people from Bronxville will go there. I mean, we're talking locality. We can't tell exactly where people are coming from when they retail.
Yeah, I'm talking
and-
about
and
the-
Retail, we can certainly get you that information. That's not a problem.
Any other requests from the board members?
I think you already covered this, but I would specifically be interested in the number of deliveries of raw goods. So your incoming,
That's good.
your butter, your,
Yeah, nothing's, to the best of your ability.
I don't need to know how many, I'm just saying, you're getting 2 a week
Generalization
or
would-
2 a
would-
day.
To the best that we can, we'll do
That's fine.
that.
Thank you.
Mr. Salerno, is there anything else?
Just like to clarify what this photograph depicts. This tractor trailer is indeed on Columbus Avenue. It's not in the driveway. but it's blocking the driveway.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to explain to the board.
Is anyone else in the public that wishes to speak at this time? Yes, sir, come to the microphone.
My name is Frank Campana. I'm Tal's husband. I'm one of the owners of Martine's. And I'd like to just point something out when you talk about what is eaten in the bakery and what is sent out. Are we going to ask Crestwood Pizza how many people eat a pizza in Crestwood, and do deliveries count? Do they deliver to country clubs? I mean, it doesn't really make sense. And as far as the driveway, Mr. Salerno said, "Oh, it's a little tiny driveway," and now he's saying that there's tractor trailers in and out. I don't know how they would fit if it's a little tiny driveway. And furthermore, there's a wood shop on the premise in the back lot. They run power saws back there. I've seen them do some construction work. They also have cars in and out. How come this complainant, this female, whoever she is, how come the fella that owns the wood shop isn't here? Why hasn't a complaint been made against him? We seem to be under a lot of scrutiny. It seems like there's a lot of detective work that has been going on. I mean, I think that what we have to keep in mind is that we started from nothing. I'm a retired police officer. When we opened the bakery, my wife was a cleaning lady. She was cleaning people's toilets. My brother-in-law was working in a restaurant 20 hours a day. They immigrated here from Israel, and what did we do? We followed the American dream, right? Capitalism. We started a business with less than nothing, and we've grown. Isn't that the way you mentioned capitalism? Isn't that the way things should go? And it just seems like we're getting harassed. I don't know if it's harassment, but we're being scrutinized, and what's going on here? Are the other businesses being looked at? How many pizzas go out? I don't know. It doesn't really make sense. Why we're even here. As far as the driveway is concerned, like, where did this woman come from? Like, how did this all happen? It's just strange. And I just want to point out, how it all started. We started from nothing, and we're just trying to work.
I don't think anyone's questioning.
Make a little,
I don't think anyone's questioning your business or your success. I think most people on this board probably come to your business more than a few times.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we love your business. We're glad you're a success story here in Tuckahoe. I don't think anyone's even slightly questioning that.
It's frustrating to just, why?
We can understand that, but it's cued by a complaint, which then starts this kind of entire process. And at that point, it's a machination, but it has to be done.
And also what
Just,
what I don't think helps your case, from my point of view, is that you encroached on space downstairs. Then you proceed, get caught, come for the permit. Then you encroach on more space, and then a complaint comes, and then you need to get either the interpretation of the law or, so why not come forward first? Great, you're expanding, but come to the boards and get the proper approvals before you encroach on the space. So you're kind of like setting yourself up.
May I say something? Mr. Solano, you were talking about the driveway.
You have to direct your comments to the board, please.
I'm sorry. Mr. Salerno said something about the driveway, people in and out. This lady made it a personal vendetta against us. I have no idea why. First, they said that we were dumping stuff in the sewer over there. They found suds and everything else. We had it on video that the super was doing it over there, and we gave you the video, right? Okay. Then she's talking about reverse beeps of trucks and everything else. It's not a wood store over there or shop. They have a plumber over there that has 2 big trucks in and out all day with the beeping
Again,
noises.
direct your to the board.
I'm sorry, with the beeping noises that he's going in and out. Then, I really don't like to fight dirty. but she always complains about us. I never complain
Okay,
about her.
okay. We really
The
want to
thing
stay.
is that right now, cement was dumped in the,
Okay,
in those.
well, we want to
those-
stay on the topic that's in front of this board.
Okay, the truck that she's showing, who's to say that it's our truck?
You have a valid point that this is a photograph of a truck, and we need more information or testimony about the truck. And that's what we've requested. But I want you to understand, and your husband, at some point in time, I mean, villages have ordinances for reasons in quality of life. And at some point in time, businesses, as was said by Mr. Salerno, a victim of their own success. At some point in time, any business reaches a limitation, and the urge always is to, to make that next jump to a larger facility is very expensive, and do you want to take that risk? And as I said, the pet salon has shut the door. They didn't know more new customers. They knew what they were limited to, and they're not taking any more customers. Either they go get another place and expand, or,
Exactly like we did in Scarsdale.
okay, but that's, you reach a certain limit, and for whatever reason, whether it's a neighbor, whatever reason, something happens, the building inspector happens to be driving by and sees something, whatever the reason may be, an inquiry is triggered, and maybe your success is, pushes you to the limit, and we have rules for everybody's well-being, and you have to abide by those rules. And well, that's a determination that, is in front of this board. And I speak for this board, I believe, have a reputation of being a very fair board, an expeditious board. We're not going to make a decision tonight. I don't feel there is an absolute need. I don't think things are being held up, and this is a new area for us, and I want to do more research. And I want to be, and I know that my members of this board want to be as fair as possible, and I can assure you that this board will be working during the interim between the next meeting, getting more research and more information to help us make our determination. Thank you.
And I may have already said, but I hope this is not, especially to your husband, I hope this is not viewed as some sort of antagonistic experience. This is, I think the success of your business is fantastic. I think it's a wonderful that you're here in Tuckahoe, and I think that all of us appreciate what you're providing to the village, and that's not the question here. I hope you're so successful you need a massive 40-story factory someday, but it's, that's not the question of whether or not we appreciate and enjoy your presence here in Tuckahoe. Okay?
Mr. Maron, anything you want to add? Okay, I'm going to make a motion to keep the public hearing open on 10 Fisher. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. Okay, everyone has their homework to do. Council for the village, I also want to do some work on, and we'll be conferring about this request to the village board. This just seems a little different to me about the 5 horsepower and the board of trustees. So I want to do some work with you this month on why the village board of trustees would be involved in something.
That's the way the code's written.
Yeah, it just seems a little different.
Goes back to the 30s.
Probably, as Mr. Williams says,
All right, great.
might be a little outdated, but we can discuss that. I've done my research on it, so.
Any comments from the board members? Anything they'd like to add? Okay, that being so, I make a motion to close the Wednesday, October 14th, 2015 zoning board of appeals of Village of Tuckahoe. Do I have a second?
second.
All in favor? Aye. Good night, Tuckahoe.